A white millionaire, Franklin, humiliates a black family at a luxury restaurant, confident in his superiority. However, after he finishes his meal, the waiter hands him a note that reveals a shocking truth. What is written on the note, and how will it change Franklin's life forever? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this amazing story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Franklin Stone got out of his sleek black luxury car and gave the eager valet the keys. The Silver Spoon, his favorite high-class restaurant, had a faint scent of fine food in the cool evening air. He straightened up his expensive suit and walked toward the door with a happy smile on his face. The doorman quickly opened the heavy glass door because he recognized Franklin right away. "Good evening, Mr. Stone," he said, with a polite thumbs up. Franklin barely acknowledged the welcome before rushing into the warm, dimly lit room. The soft classical music and the sound of silverware clinking against fine china made the room feel calm. He took a big breath in and enjoyed the feeling of being alone. The maître d', a tall man with graying hair, rushed over. "Mr. Stone, what a pleasure to see you this evening. Your usual table is ready, sir." "Excellent," Franklin said, making it clear that he didn't expect anything less. As he followed the maître d' to the corner table he liked best, Franklin looked around the dining room. He was pleased to see that the other customers were also well-dressed and obviously wealthy, just like him. In his world, money and power were the most important things. As Franklin took his place, he quickly nodded to accept the menu. "The usual champagne to start, Paul," he told the waiter who was standing over him. "Right away, Mr. Stone," Paul said, and quickly left to do what was asked. Franklin leaned back and smiled smugly. He felt like a king or queen here in the Silver Spoon. The staff knew what he liked, thought about what he would need, and treated him with the respect he thought he deserved. It was very different from the outside world, where people didn't always see how important he was. Franklin heard bits of talk from tables nearby while he looked at the menu. The air was filled with talk of business deals, trips to faraway places, and expensive purchases. He felt like he belonged because he was with people who knew how important money and power were. Paul came back with a cold bottle of champagne and showed it to Franklin to make sure he liked it before pouring a glass. The bubbles slowly fizzed and caught the soft light from the crystal chandelier above. Franklin sat down at his usual table, and the soft leather chair fit him perfectly. The waiter came back with a clean white napkin over his arm. "Good evening, Mr. Stone. What will you be having tonight?" Ed only gave the menu a quick look. "The usual medium rare." The waiter nodded and wrote down the order. "Excellent choice, sir." As the waiter left, Franklin's attention was pulled to the front door of the restaurant. A black family in nice clothes just walked in. The father, a big man with a nice face, held the door open for his wife and son. Franklin's face furrowed, and he made a thin line with his lips. As the maître d' met the family and led them to a table near his own, he watched. Franklin asked himself under his breath, "What are they doing here?" His eyes became narrow. He couldn't help but think that their appearance took away from how special the Silver Spoon was. The boy's eyes were wide with wonder as he took in his beautiful surroundings. As his family took their seats, his mom whispered something to him that made him laugh. Franklin kept looking at them, and his anger grew. He saw how the father, Harry Thompson, set the table for the family with ease and confidence. Even more annoyed, Franklin, was how the staff treated them with respect. "They can't afford this place," Franklin told himself. As he tapped his fingers impatiently on the table, it was impossible for him to get rid of the feeling that they didn't fit in his world of wealth and power. As soon as Franklin's food came, the Thompson family kept drawing his attention away. The sound of their quiet laughter made him mad. He cut into his steak with more force than was necessary, and his rising anger made him enjoy the perfectly cooked meat less. As the night went on, Franklin couldn't help but look at his family. He looked closely at their behavior and clothes. hoping to find something that would support what he already thought. He was upset that he couldn't find any. They walked with grace and confidence, and they seemed right at home in the fancy setting. As the Thompson family took their places, Franklin's anger grew like a storm cloud. He couldn't take his eyes off of them, and a scowl formed on his face. While whispering, he said, "Look at them," loud enough for people nearby to hear, acting like they belong here. A couple at the next table moved around awkwardly and looked at each other with worry in their eyes. Franklin didn't notice because he was too focused on how he thought the restaurant setting was being harmed. Franklin laughed and raised his voice a little. "I bet they're using a credit card they can't afford to pay off." He cut into his steak with a knife, making a loud noise as it hit the plate. The waiter walked up to the Thompson table and smiled. "Good evening. May I start you off with some drinks?" Harry Thompson nodded, and his voice was calm and nice. "Yes, we'll have a bottle of the House Red, please." Franklin laughed out loud. House Red. Figures they'd go for the cheapest option. Things were getting tense in the room. Other people in the restaurant were now looking at Franklin with faces that showed shock and disapproval. A woman at a table nearby whispered to her husband, "Someone needs to say something. This is terrible." The Thompsons were happily unaware of the storm that was building up around them, though. Cynthia helped Andrew fold his napkin and put it nicely under his collar. The boy looked around with wide-open eyes as he took in the beautiful scene. "Look, Mommy," Andrew said in a low voice, pointing to the crystal chandelier above them. "It's so sparkly." Cynthia smiled and ran her hand through her son's hair. "It sure is, sweetie. Isn't this place magical?" Their happiness could be felt, which was very different from Franklin's contempt. When the waiter brought them their wine, Franklin's condescending tone became even clearer. His groan was loud enough for half the room to hear. "I can't believe they're letting just anyone in here now. This used to be an exclusive establishment." The other people in the bar were clearly feeling uncomfortable. Some looked at the Thompson family with sympathy, while others glared at Franklin. But Harry, Cynthia, and Andrew were happy and focused on each other as they looked over the menu together. They had no idea that Franklin was making mean comments. Anthony walked up to Franklin's table with a silver tray skillfully balanced on his hand. "Your appetizer, Mr. Stone," he said, setting a plate of falafel balls in front of the billionaire. Franklin only gave the dish a quick glance because he was focused on the Thompson family. He turned his head to the other side and asked, "Tell me, Anthony, how often do we get guests like that in here?" His voice was full of sneer. For a moment, Anthony's smile broke. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir. We welcome all guests at the Silver Spoon," he said. "Come now," in a sarcastic tone. "You know what I'm talking about. People who clearly don't fit in with our usual clientele." The waiter shifted awkwardly, and his normally calm attitude cracked a little. "Sir, I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment on other guests." Franklin laughed. "I suppose you're right. It's just surprising to see them here. I hope they can afford it without dipping into their rent money." Anthony's face turned red. With a finger on the plate, he tried to change the subject. "How is your appetizer, Mr. Stone? Is everything to your liking?" He wasn't done, though. His voice dropped to a suspicious whisper as he leaned in. "I bet they're here on some sort of charity event. That's the only way they could afford a place like this, right?" You could feel Anthony's pain now. He turned his head to make sure no one else could hear Franklin's mean words. "Sir, perhaps we could discuss the wine selection for your main course?" Franklin waved his hand away indifferently. "Oh, don't worry about that now. I'm more interested in how our esteemed establishment is maintaining its standards these days." As the waiter stood there, he felt torn between his job to serve and his growing dislike of Franklin's behavior. He started to talk, but Franklin stopped him. He went on, "Just look at them," his voice full of disdain. "They probably think they're so special, being here. I wonder if they even know how to use all the forks." Soon as the Thompson family started to eat, Franklin's anger hit a fever pitch. He could no longer hold back his disgust at their being in the area he thought was theirs alone. Suddenly, he laughed out loud and made fun of her, and the noise could be heard throughout the fancy dining room. When Franklin pointed at the Thompson family, everyone looked at him. "Look at them," he yelled, making fun of them in his voice. "How on earth did they manage to afford a place like this?" As they watched, the other people at the table gasped in shock, and their forks smashed against their fine china. Franklin had a red face and crazy eyes that were both angry and amused. "I bet they sold their car just to eat here tonight," Franklin said, raising his voice above the din. "Each second that goes by makes it louder and more annoying. Or maybe they're lost. Did you take a wrong turn at the drive-thru?" The Thompson family looked at each other uncomfortably, with faces that showed both confusion and pain. Harry Thompson put his hand on his son Andrew's back to keep him safe, and Cynthia tried to stay calm. Franklin made fun of them, but they didn't answer. Instead, they focused on their food and each other. The attention he was getting made Franklin feel better, so he got up from his chair. He swayed a little, showing that the drinks he had earlier were starting to wear off. He yelled at the Thompsons, "Come on, tell us your secret. Did you win the lottery? Or are you here on some sort of charity case?" All that could be heard in the restaurant was Franklin's voice. The waiter stood there still, not knowing what to do. Other customers were shocked and disgusted, with some turning away in shame and others looking at Franklin in anger. Even though things were getting worse, the Thompson family stayed calm. They did their best to keep their cool while eating, but they wouldn't give Franklin the satisfaction of an answer. Even though Franklin was acting rudely, the Thompson family stayed surprisingly calm. They didn't pay attention to his advances. Instead, they focused on their food and each other. Harry gave his wife a comforting smile and gently squeezed her hand. Cynthia then stroked Andrew's hair and spoke soothing words into their young son's ear. It was very clear that Franklin was cocky and his family was polite. Even though Franklin kept going on and on, the Thompsons were talking quietly, with low, steady voices. They laughed quietly at Andrew's joke, and their eyes lit up with real happiness. Other people in the restaurant could not help but hear Franklin's rude and insulting speech. His words hung heavy in the air, making everyone awkward as they moved from table to table. People in the restaurant looked at each other with worry, and forgot about their food as they watched what was happening. While the minutes went by, there was a shift in the restaurant. At first, Franklin's rage shocked everyone, but then it made people feel sorry for the Thompson family. When they were treated so badly for no reason, people praised their dignity. There were hints of support going around the tables. Two older people sitting at a table nearby shook their heads in disagreement with Franklin's behavior. A young woman wiped away a tear because of how strong the family was. Even though the waitstaff was trying to act professionally, they couldn't hide how uncomfortable they were with Franklin's behavior. When Franklin kept going on and on, the Thompsons' calmness under pressure stood out in a big way. They stayed cool even though he got louder and more angry. Their bodies were at ease and their faces were calm. It was like they were in a bubble of peace, shielded from the storm going on around them. Anthony walked up to Franklin's table with the main dish on a tray. He knew that the restaurant was tense because his hands were shaking a little as he put the plate down. Franklin didn't notice that the waiter was upset and kept yelling at the Thompson family. Franklin showed the Thompsons with his fork and said, "Can you believe they're still here? People like that shouldn't be allowed in a place like this." Anthony's face turned red with shame, but he kept up his professional attitude. He asked, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Everything to your liking, sir?" When someone asked Franklin a question, he barely looked up from the family across the room. He laughed and said, "I bet they can't even read the menu right. Probably just pointing at pictures." As the waiter tried to figure out what to do, his discomfort was clear. He took a quick look around and saw that everyone in the restaurant was now looking at their table. The other people in the restaurant watched Franklin's behavior get worse with a mix of fear and interest. While he was sorry, Anthony went to the Thompson family's table. As he got closer, he could see that they were stressed, even though they were trying to look calm. As he filled up their water cups again, he leaned in close. Anthony whispered, "I'm so sorry about this." His voice was filled with real regret. "Please know that we don't condone such behavior." Harry Thompson acknowledged with a small nod, and the look in his eyes showed that he was both thankful and tired. A silent way for Cynthia to thank Anthony for being kind. She reached out and quickly touched his arm. Anthony could feel the stress of the situation building up as he went from table to table. He felt bad about Franklin's behavior, but couldn't do anything about it. Because the diner only served wealthy regulars like Franklin, he was stuck in a tough spot. As the night went on, Franklin's behavior became more and more annoying. Other people in the restaurant looked at him with disapproval, as his loud, mocking laughter rang through the room. He was sure that his wealth and standing gave him the right to do whatever he pleased, so he didn't care about the results of his actions. Franklin made a funny face and pointed his wineglass at the Thompson family. "Look at them trying to use the fancy silverware. It's like watching monkeys at a tea party." The nasty things he said hung in the air, making what was normally a nice place smell bad. The other customers moved around in their seats uncomfortably and looked at each other with worried eyes. The sound of cutlery clinking against fine china was now drowned out by Franklin's angry voice and mean laughs. Even though things were getting worse, the Thompson family stayed calm. Harry clenched his teeth and focused on cutting his steak. Cynthia started a quiet chat with Andrew to take his mind off of what was going on. Everyone in the diner could see how respectful they were, even though they were being treated so badly, except Franklin. An old couple sitting next to each other talked to each other, and their worried faces showed it. As a young woman who was eating alone kept nervously looking between Franklin and the Thompsons. She forgot to eat and kept looking at them. Even a group of businessmen who had been having a lively conversation earlier spoke quietly now, their eyes moving to Franklin's table. The restaurant went from being a place for fancy eating to being tense and uncomfortable. It seemed like the soft background music stopped playing because Franklin kept making fun of it, and the other customers were getting more and more tense. After eating, the Thompson family looked over at Harry as he dabbed his mouth with the paper. With a small nod, he told the waiter what to do. The restaurant was very quiet now. There was tense silence, instead of the normal chatter of diners. Everyone looked like they were holding their breath, eager to see how this awkward evening would end. Still not realizing how much trouble he had caused, Franklin kept muttering under his breath while looking at the Thompson family. The other people in the restaurant nervously looked back and forth between Franklin and the Thompsons, forgetting about their own meals as the scene played out. Anthony walked carefully up to the Thompson table, taking slow, controlled steps. As soon as he got there, he looked Harry in the eyes and quietly apologized for what had happened that night. "Thank you, Anthony," Harry said in a soft voice, even though the night had been going on for a while. The meal was excellent. Even though Franklin had said mean things, Cynthia still smiled warmly at Anthony. Andrew, who was little, could feel the stress, but didn't fully understand it. He looked up at the waiter with a curious face. Throughout the evening, the Thompson family stayed calm while enjoying their food and talking with each other. They talked quietly with their heads held high, because they didn't want Franklin's behavior to ruin the whole evening. The way they handled stress was very different from Franklin's constant grumbling and scowling. As they watched, the other people in the restaurant showed a mix of sympathy and respect for the Thompson family. As the family got ready to leave, many people looked down, because they felt bad that they had been quiet in the face of Franklin's racism. Eating the last few bites of his fancy meal, Franklin smiled smugly. He was happy, not only with the delicious food, but also with how good he thought he was. Even though the diner was less busy, the tension from earlier was still there, thick like a fog. As usual, Anthony walked up to Franklin's table in a businesslike way. He said, "I hope you enjoyed your meal, sir," and his voice didn't show any signs of the pain he was feeling earlier. Anthony quietly put a folded piece of paper on the clean white tabletop as he cleared away the empty plates. Franklin didn't give the note much attention because he thought it was just his bill. "Just leave it there," he laughed, and waved his hand away. "I'll take care of it shortly." Anthony gave Franklin a nod and then left, leaving him alone with the strange message. As Franklin sipped his brandy after dinner, his eyes kept going back to the folded paper. He was becoming more and more interested. It could be more than just the price. He might have gotten a message from Anthony. Franklin couldn't hold back any longer and reached for the note with perfectly groomed fingers. Carefully unfolding it, he raised an eyebrow as he began to read. Looking over the words, his face lost all of its color. Franklin had been making fun of the Thompson family all night. But the note showed a shocking truth. They owned the silver spoon and were very wealthy. They also ran a number of successful businesses in town and were well known for their generosity. They had just returned from a trip abroad. As Franklin read the note again, his hand shook. Because he was having a hard time processing the information, he started to realize what his actions meant, and they hit him like a tidal wave. He had spent the whole evening making fun of and insulting the owners of this business, who were not only as rich as him, but also had a better name and standing in the community. His earlier cockiness went away, and a sick feeling took its place in the pit of his stomach. As Franklin looked around the restaurant, he suddenly became aware of the looks of disapproval from other customers. The weight of what he did crushed him, making him feel small and stupid. As he read the note again, his eyes grew bigger with each word. The truth hit him so hard that he was out of breath and dizzy. That made no sense to him. The silver spoon was owned by the family he had made fun of all night. Franklin spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper. This can't be right." A close-by person named Anthony moved closer to Franklin's table. He said, in a soft but strong voice, "I'm afraid it is, sir." The look on Franklin's face showed that he was shocked and horrified as he looked up at the waiter. "Oh," he begged, they own this place?" Hoping there was a mistake. Anthony gave a serious nod. "Yes, sir, the Thompson family has owned the silver spoon for years. They're also behind several other successful businesses in town." As Franklin realized what was really going on, he had to deal with the results of his actions, the weight of his pride, and the judgment of those around him. There was a wave of sickness that hit Franklin. He remembered every mean thing he had said, laughed, or looked down his nose at the Thompsons. He felt so ashamed that it was too much for him to handle. However, why did they not say anything? Franklin's voice broke as he asked, "I did this. I was that." "They didn't," Anthony said in a low voice. "This is Mr. and Mrs. Thompson would rather have a quiet dinner with their son than make a fuss. They are known for having grace and honor." Franklin was so embarrassed that his face burned. Why had he behaved so badly? He couldn't see anything, because he was so proud and prejudiced. I don't know what to say," Franklin stuttered, feeling like he had made a huge mistake. "The shame I feel now is unmatched in my lifetime." Anthony kept quiet, which gave Franklin time to think about how bad what he did was. The once proud millionaire was now slouched in his chair, and you could feel the weight of his sorrow in every part of his body. Franklin sat still in his chair, his face filled with pain and sorrow. The busy sounds of the diner faded into the background. As he thought about how terrible what he had done was, his mind was racing as he thought about all the mean things he had said, and looked down on the Thompson family. How could I have done that? He whispered to himself so softly that no one could hear him. Everything he had done wrong weighed on him and made it hard for him to breathe. Franklin's throat was suddenly very dry, and he reached for his water glass with shaking hands. He could see his image in the shiny silverware as he sipped. The stranger, looking back at him, was rude, mean, and narrow-minded. Franklin was totally embarrassed about himself for the first time in years. He was always proud of his success, wealth, and high position. But when he saw what his bias had led to, he understood how empty those accomplishments were. I judged them based on nothing but my own assumptions. Franklin felt bad about himself. He looked around the restaurant for the first time and saw a wide range of people enjoying their food. I didn't even give them a chance, he said. How many times did he turn people down because of how they looked or because of what he thought about them? His stomach hurt at the thought. Franklin's thoughts turned to his own life, his beliefs, and the way he had behaved. He always thought that his money made him better than other people and gave him the right to look down on them. Now that he saw how kind and gracious the Thompson family was, he realized how wrong and cruel that belief was. Franklin put his face in his hands and whispered, "I've been so wrong. That's so terribly wrong." His carefully built world of being better than everyone else and feeling entitled started to fall apart around him. An intense feeling of guilt and regret replaced it. Franklin was lost and didn't know who he was without his pride to protect him. As Franklin realized how bad he had been, he knew he had to make things right. But how could he make up for being so mean and prejudiced in public? He felt scared about having to face the Thompson family, but he knew he had to do it. As Franklin got out of his chair, his legs shook as he took a deep breath. He felt bad about what he did, but he knew he had to deal with the results. He walked slowly and carefully across the restaurant floor to the table where the Thompson family was sitting. As he got closer, the dining room went from being busy with conversation to being quiet. Everybody looked at what was happening. Franklin could feel people looking straight at him from behind. But he kept his attention on the family in front of him. Harry, Cynthia, and Andrew looked up when Franklin came over to their table. On their faces, there was a mix of interest and weariness. Franklin had a racing heart and a dry mouth as he tried to find the right words. "This is Mr." His voice was shaking, and he spoke barely above a whisper. Franklin cleared his throat and tried again, this time in a louder voice. I'm sorry," she said. It was very quiet in the restaurant. Franklin could hear his fast breathing as he spoke. "I can't explain how I behaved tonight." Franklin's voice cracked as he talked. "I made bad assumptions about you and your family, and I behaved in a mean and unfair way. I felt so proud of myself that I couldn't see the truth. You were so gracious and respectful when I was being rude, and I feel terrible about what I did." While looking at each member of the Thompson family, Franklin's eyes filled with tears. "I know that words can't fix the damage I've done, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I feel bad about what I did and hope that one day it can make things right." Both Thompsons looked at each other, but their faces couldn't be read. Franklin stood there, open and vulnerable, waiting for them to answer. The whole restaurant held its breath, and you could feel the focus in the air. Franklin kept saying sorry, but his voice was shaking as he did so. He said, with tears in his eyes, "I let my bias cloud my judgment. I thought something about you just because of how you looked, which was wrong. I failed to see what great people you are, so I picked to be mean and unkind." The restaurant was dead quiet as everyone, including the staff, watched what was happening. Franklin's shoulders sagged, and instead of his usual upbeat posture, he showed genuine regret. Franklin said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "What I did was wrong. I'm so sorry for any pain my words and actions have caused. I can only imagine how they made you feel. Despite my bad behavior, your family treated me with such grace and respect. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you'll give me a chance to redeem myself." Harry Thompson and Cynthia Thompson looked at each other, but their faces couldn't be read. Little Andrew looked at his parents and then back at Franklin. His young face showed that he was both confused and interested. Franklin held back tears as he took a deep breath. "I know that you might not be able to forgive me right away. I realized it will take time to heal the wounds I've made by what I did. I want you to know, though, that this has made me see things otherwise. I know I was wrong now, and I'm determined to change." The other people in the restaurant were speechless as they saw Franklin, who had been so cocky and sure of himself, now standing in front of the Thompson family, weak and sad. There was a big difference between how he behaved before and how he was now, and everyone could see that he was truly sorry. Franklin waited for the Thompson family to answer, his heart racing. The restaurant was tense, and everyone was holding their breath as they wondered what would happen next in the strange situation. Harry Thompson listened carefully as Franklin said sorry. He kept a calm face. The restaurant went silent as soon as Franklin was done talking. Everyone was very excited to see what Harry would say. I waited a long time before Harry spoke. His voice was calm and friendly. "This is Mr. Stone. I'm glad you said sorry. We need to be brave to admit when we're wrong, and I can tell you're sorry for what you did." Franklin was so happy that his shoulders sagged, but Harry wasn't done yet. He then said, "But I want you to understand the harm this kind of behavior can cause. When we judge people based on how they look or what we think they're worth, we hurt and divide the world." Franklin nodded and looked down as he took in what Harry said. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, no matter where they come from or how they look, Harry said, in a soft voice. Below the surface, we all have stories, struggles, and victories that aren't clear. So it's very important to have an open mind and heart when you talk to other people. Franklin could feel Harry's words hitting him hard as he talked. He understood the pain his careless acts could have caused. "We should never judge a book by its cover," Harry said, his voice getting louder. "We see each person as a special person with their own worth and value. One-sided opinions hurt others and keep us from growing and learning." Franklin gave another nod, feeling both sorry for himself and thankful. He was thankful that Harry was kind, even though he had been mean. Harry ended by saying, "I hope this will change the way you see the world and the people in it. We can all make the world a better place by being more understanding and caring, one exchange at a time." While Harry's words hung in the air, the restaurant was dead quiet. Franklin stood there and thought about the important lesson he had just learned. He felt very bad about what he had done in the past, but he also saw a chance to change for the better. With the lesson's weight on his heart, Franklin paid close attention to what Harry said. When Harry was done talking, Franklin felt a wave of shame and thankfulness. Nothing came out of his mouth when he opened it to talk. When Harry saw Franklin struggling, he changed the way he looked. "This is Mr." he said softly to Stone. "I think that every mistake is a chance to learn and grow. So, I'd like to offer an invitation to you." Franklin's eyebrows went up in surprise. "Invitation? Why?" he asked in a voice that was really close to a whisper. Harry said, "Yes, that's right. A foundation that our family runs helps people who are less wealthy and promotes fairness and hard work. The main sponsors are us, but we're always looking for others who want to help." Harry's wife Cynthia added with a smile, "We think that if we all work together, we can really make a difference in our community." Franklin was speechless at how nice they were. He didn't get why they would give him that chance after how he had acted. Harry said, "We think that by helping the foundation do its work, you could learn for yourself how important it is to be humble and treat others with respect. Hearing about something is one thing, but going through it yourself is something else." An uncomfortable lump grew in Franklin's throat. He was deeply moved by their offer, but he didn't think he deserved it at all. He stuttered, "Because of what I've done, I don't deserve your kindness." Cynthia said in a soft voice, "That's exactly why we're offering. Everyone deserves a chance to learn and grow. We believe that this experience could be transformative for you." After looking at Harry, Franklin then turned to Cynthia and then at young Andrew, who was watching the conversation with interest. He was speechless at how kind they were and how generous they were being. I'm truly honored by your offer," Franklin said, struggling to keep his voice from breaking. "But I'm not sure I'm worthy of such a chance." Harry gently touched Franklin on the shoulder. "Mr. Stone, worthiness isn't about what you've done in the past. It's about what you choose to do moving forward. We're offering you a chance to be part of something bigger than yourself, to make a real difference in people's lives. That's when Franklin stood there, tears in his eyes. He felt something in his heart that he hadn't felt in years. When the Thompson family was kind and forgave him, Franklin said, with a shaking voice, I don't know how to thank you. Your offer is more than I deserve, but if you'll have me, I'd be honored to help with your foundation. Harry gave a friendly smile and put out his hand. Welcome aboard, Mr. Stone. We're glad to have you. A weight lifted from Franklin's shoulders as he shook Harry's hand. Being filled with shame and sorrow, he started to feel hope and determination instead. A soft voice came from Cynthia as she spoke up. We have a meeting tomorrow afternoon at the community center. Would you like to join us? Franklin happily nodded. Yes, I'd love to. Thank you. As the days went by, Franklin worked hard on the foundation's projects. He showed up to meetings, helped plan events, and even got his hands dirty to serve food at a nearby soup kitchen. Every day, he could feel his point of view changing. Franklin and Harry were painting a run-down community center. One afternoon, when Franklin stopped and looked around, he saw folks from all walks of life working together, having fun, and helping each other out. It was a long way from the small, exclusive world he used to love. You know, Harry, Franklin said, wiping sweat off his forehead. I used to think that being successful was all about how much money you had, or how important you seemed. But now I see things differently. Harry gave him a nod, telling him to keep going. I understand now that real success isn't about what you have, Franklin said, with tears in his voice. It's about the impact you have on others. It's about making a difference in people's lives. Harry gave Franklin a smile and a pat on the back. That's a valuable lesson, Franklin, and you're right. The most fulfilling success comes from lifting others up, not looking down on them. Like Franklin saw the world through a different lens as he worked with the foundation longer. He began to value everyone he met, no matter who they were or where they came from. In his heart, compassion took the place of competition, and he felt a level of satisfaction he had never felt before. When Franklin started working with the Thompson Family Foundation, he was in a place he had never been before. Instead of the fancy restaurants and businesses he was used to, there were community centers and soup kitchens. He didn't know how to talk to the people he met at first, so he felt out of place. On a sunny morning, Franklin went to a job training program for single moms with Cynthia Thompson. As he helped set up chairs for the class, he heard a girl named Lisa talking about how hard things were for her. Lisa said, with a strong voice, "It's not easy, but I'm going to make a better life for my kids, no matter what." Franklin was amazed at how strong she was. He'd never had to worry about taking care of his family, so Lisa's strength made him feel weak. That same week, Franklin and Harry worked as volunteers at a food bank. An old man with tears in his eyes came up to them while they were sorting gifts. The man said, "Thank you," but his voice was shaking. "This food, it means I can eat this week." He could feel a lump in his throat. He had never really been hungry, so the man's thanks for something as simple as food moved him deeply. As the days turned into weeks, Franklin was always shocked by the kind of people he met through the foundation. He saw single parents with many jobs to support their kids, refugees learning English to make their lives better, and teens helping younger kids learn English to break the cycle of poverty. One night, Franklin met a guy named Tom while helping to serve meals at a shelter for the homeless. Tom had lost his job and his home due to a medical crisis, but he spoke with hope about rebuilding his life. "It's been tough," Tom admitted, "but I'm grateful for places like this. It reminds me that there are good people in the world willing to help." Franklin nodded, and he was feeling a range of emotions. He knew that he had been quick to judge people like Tom, thinking that their problems were caused by being lazy or making bad decisions. Now, he knew the complicated things that could make someone homeless. That night, as Franklin drove home, he thought about his own life. Designer clothes and expensive cars used to seem very important. But now, they didn't seem as important after seeing how rich the human spirit was. Franklin spent more time with the Thompson family as he got more involved with the work of the foundation. Their kindness and began to break down the walls he had built around himself. On a Saturday afternoon, Franklin went with the Thompsons to help clean up the neighborhood. As they picked up trash in a nearby park, the Thompsons' young son Andrew walked up to Franklin and gave him a strange look. "Mr. Stone," Andrew asked with soft eyes, "why do you help us now?" Franklin took a moment to understand what the child meant by being so direct. He got down on his knees next to Andrew. He had a lump in his throat. "Well, Andrew," he said, his voice soft, "I learned that I was wrong about a lot of things. Your family showed me that true happiness comes from helping others, not just having money." Cynthia heard what was being said and smiled at Franklin. "That's a beautiful way to put it, Franklin," he said. "We're glad you're here with us." As the weeks went by, Franklin looked forward to his time with the Thompson family more and more. They invited him to family dinners where everyone laughed and had deep talks. Before, he used to eat alone at fancy places. This was very different. At one of these dinners, Harry told stories about the early days of the foundation and the problems they had to deal with. Franklin listened carefully, amazed by how hard the family worked and how dedicated they were. "You know, Franklin," Harry said, his eyes sparkling, "when we first started, many people doubted us. They said we couldn't make a difference. But we knew that even small acts of kindness could change lives." Franklin nodded, and he felt a rush of respect for the Thompsons. He responded, "I'm starting to get that now. You've shown me what real success looks like." As Franklin continued to work with the Thompsons, he could feel himself changing. The pride that had once marked him was slowly giving way to humility and kindness. He felt a sense of satisfaction that he had never had before when he did small acts of kindness. As they left a charity event one day, Cynthia smiled at Franklin. She told him, "You've come a long way. We're proud of the person you're becoming." The changes in Franklin's behavior became more clear to those around him. As he went on his path of personal growth, he had gone from being cocky to being genuinely kind and caring, and it showed in everything he did. At a charity dinner for the Thompson Foundation, everyone could see how much Franklin had changed. He easily got through the crowd and was polite and respectful to both rich donors and volunteers. People he used to know were amazed to see Franklin having deep talks with people from all walks of life. "Is that really Franklin Stone?" asked Margaret, who had known Franklin for a long time at the country club. "I can hardly believe my eyes." The change in Franklin was, in fact, hard to miss. He paid close attention as a young scholarship recipient told his story. His eyes lit up with real interest. When the young man was done talking, Franklin put his hand on his shoulder and told him, "Your determination is inspiring. Keep going, and you'll do great things." More and more people noticed how humble and kind Franklin had become as the night went on. People started to be interested in the foundation's work because of how enthusiastic he was about it. "I have to say, you seem different. What's going on with you?" Franklin asked Richard, a fellow businessman. Franklin gave a warm smile. "I've learned that true fulfillment comes from helping others, Richard. The Thompsons have shown me that wealth isn't just about money. It's about the richness of human connections and the impact we can have on people's lives." Richard carefully nodded, showing that what Franklin said had an effect on him. "You know, and thinking about getting more involved in charity work myself. Perhaps you could tell me more about the foundation?" A small group of people gathered around them as Franklin excitedly talked about the Thompson Foundation's projects. People could feel his fire, and soon they were asking how they could help or donate. By the end of the night, Franklin had convinced a number of old friends to join the foundation's cause. The changes he went through not only affected him, but also the lives of other people in his social group. Every day that went by, Franklin's work with the Thompson Foundation grew stronger. He gave the foundation's projects his full attention, and used his business sense and money to support causes that worked for equality, and gave people who weren't as fortunate chances. A bright and sunny morning, Franklin showed up at a nearby community center to help fix up the building. They worked together with people from all walks of life to paint walls and fix broken furniture. He saw Harry Thompson smiling at him as he wiped the sweat off his forehead. Harry told Franklin, "You've come a long way." Franklin nodded, and he felt proud and happy in a way he had never felt before. "This work, it's changing me, Harry. I never knew how much joy could come from helping others." People in the neighborhood heard about how dedicated Franklin was. People talked about how he went from being a self-centered millionaire to a passionate philanthropist at both social events and business talks. Some people who used to look down on Franklin now spoke highly of him. With Franklin's help, the organization started to get more donors and volunteers. Through his business contacts, he was able to get money for new projects, such as a scholarship program for needy students and a center to help the homeless find work. At a meeting of the foundation's board, Franklin came up with a big idea to help more people. He said, with excitement in his eyes, "We have the tools and the drive to make a real difference. Let's think bigger. We could open similar centers in neighboring cities. Maybe even start a nationwide movement." The board members, including the Thompsons, paid close attention as Franklin explained his goals. His commitment was contagious, and the room was soon full of people excited about what could happen. Franklin's work for the organization grew, and he had more things to do than ever. But this work gave him a sense of meaning and joy, which was different from his old life, where he was after money and fame. He spent his days talking to community leaders, organizing workers, and keeping an eye on projects himself. As Franklin was leaving a youth center that had just opened with foundation funding, a young girl came up to him. "Mr. Stone," she whispered, "thank you for helping us. This place means so much to me and my friends." Franklin got down on her level, and his heart was beating fast. He said in a soft voice, "Thank you very much. But remember, it's not just me, it's all of us working together that makes this possible." As Franklin's work with the Thompson Foundation went on, he thought more and more about the life he used to live. One night, he was in his office, surrounded by project plans and thank you letters from people the foundation had helped. He couldn't help but shake his head when he thought about the old him. He took a picture off his desk that was taken at the opening of the foundation's newest community center and put it in a frame. In it, he was with the Thompson family and a group of happy helpers. Franklin's smile in the picture was real, which was very different from the fake, cocky grin he used to wear in his old business photos. Franklin thought to himself, "What a fool I was," as he ran his fingers along the sides of the frame. He understood that what he thought about money and status before was shallow and wrong. It wasn't the designer clothes, the exclusive clubs, or the fancy parties that made him truly happy or fulfilled. While Franklin was putting his desk's papers in order, he thought about the people he had met through the foundation's work. They made him think of Maria, a single mom who had found stable work through their job training program, and Marcus, a smart young man who was now going to college on one of their grants. Franklin was truly moved by these stories of people who worked hard and didn't give up. He learned to value being humble and thankful in a way he had never done before. Maria's face lit up with joy when she got her first paycheck, and Marcus's eyes filled with tears when he got his acceptance letter. These were times more valuable than any luxury Franklin had ever enjoyed. At that moment, Franklin leaned back in his chair and felt calm. He was truly happy for the first time in his life. No longer did he feel the need to show that he was the richest or strongest person in the room. Rather than anger, he felt calm and happy knowing that he was truly making a change in the world. Ethan stopped at the door to his office as he got ready to leave for the day. He turned around and looked back at the room. His new life's work was all over the desk and stuck to the walls. When he thought about how far he had come, he smiled. It seemed like Franklin spent more and more time with the Thompson family as the weeks went by. The advice they gave him was very helpful on his path to becoming a better person. After a very successful event to raise money for the foundation, one night, Franklin sat in the living room of Harry and Cynthia Thompson with them. "You've come a long way, Franklin," Harry told him with warm eyes. "We're proud of the progress you've made." Ethan had a lump in his throat. "I couldn't have done it without the help of your family," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. Cynthia leaned in, and her soft smile gave me hope. "We all face challenges in life, Franklin. It's how we overcome them that defines us." Harry and Cynthia started to talk about their own problems and successes. As the conversation went on, they talked about the early days of their businesses, the problems they had, and the times when they almost gave up on their dreams. "There was a time," he said, "when we almost lost everything. Our first restaurant was on the brink of failure." Franklin paid close attention, his eyes wide with surprise. He always thought that the Thompsons' success was easy. Cynthia said, "We were working around the clock, barely making ends meet, but we refused to give up." The way they kept going struck a chord with Franklin. He began to see the Thompsons in a different way, not just as great business owners, but also as people who had been through hard times and come out stronger. The talk turned to the foundation's work as the night went on. Franklin was truly moved by how much the Thompsons wanted to help other people. Their dedication to improving people's lives was unshakable, and it motivated Franklin to do even more in his own work. "You know, Franklin," he said, "true success isn't measured by the size of your bank account. It's about the lives you touch and the positive change you bring to the world." These words hit Franklin very close to home. He knew that his growing relationship with the Thompson family was making him very different. Their influence was helping him create a more caring view of the world, one that went far beyond the small limits of his old life. One Sunday afternoon at a nearby country club, Franklin's change was put to the test. While having lunch on the deck, he saw Richard Blackwell, an old business partner, walking up to his table. When Franklin thought about the man's often biased views, his stomach got tight. Richard yelled and tapped Franklin on the shoulder. "Franklin, my good man, it's been ages. How are you?" Franklin tried to smile in a nice way. "I'm well, Richard. How are you?" Richard sat down without being asked. "Oh, same old. I heard you've been spending time with that Thompson bunch and their little charity project." "What's that about?" He could feel his jaw getting tight. "It's not a little charity project, Richard. It's a foundation that does important work for our community." Richard laughed and waved his hand indifferently. "Come on, Franklin, you can't be serious. Those people don't need handouts. They just need to work harder." Franklin got red in the face with anger. He took a big breath and thought about everything the Thompsons had taught him. "That's not true, Richard. The foundation helps people who are already working incredibly hard, but face systemic barriers." "Systemic barriers?" Richard asked with a sneer. "That's just liberal nonsense. You're not buying into that, are you?" His voice was clear as he stood up. "Richard, I don't believe anything. Truth be told, I've seen it for myself. The work of the organization is very important, and the people it helps deserve our support and gratitude." Richard's face turned darker. "Franklin, you're different now. What took place with you?" His voice was steady as he said, "I grew up, Richard. I learned to see things other than how I saw them. The Thompsons and the foundation taught me how important it is to be kind and understanding." While Richard was gasping in shock, Franklin felt a wave of pride wash over him. There, he saw how different he was now from the person he used to be. People in town started to see Franklin in a different way after hearing that he worked with the Thompson Family Foundation. The millionaire, who used to be shy, was now a common sight at community events, where he would roll up his sleeves and help out. His real smile and willingness to hear other people's stories moved a lot of people. Mrs. Thompson, who has lived in the area for a long time, told her friend in a whisper, "Can you believe that's the same Franklin Stone? He was out at the soup kitchen last week. Everyone liked him a lot." Her friend agreed and nodded. "I heard he's finding jobs for people who need them by using his business connections. He seems like a whole different person." Franklin's image slowly changed, but it could not be denied. People who used to avoid looking at him on the street now smiled and greeted him warmly. When he walked into a store, the owners smiled. They no longer saw him as just a rich customer, but as an important part of the community. Mayor Johnson praised Franklin's work at a town council meeting. "I admire Mr. Stone's commitment to our community through his work with the Thompson Family Foundation. Everyone has learned the value of second chances and the need to give back from him." People all over town talked about Franklin's story at dinner parties. It was a way for parents to teach their kids about being kind and how things can change. Teachers used Franklin's story in the classroom to show how people can grow and how kindness can change things. People who didn't believe Franklin could change started to change their minds. People from his old business life, who had laughed at his new path, now came up to him to ask about the foundation's work and how they could get involved. A young woman named Cynthia stopped Franklin as he walked down Main Street one afternoon. Franklin had helped Cynthia through one of the foundation's projects. "Mr. Stone, I just wanted to thank you," she said through tears. "Your help has changed my whole life. It's never too late to become a better person." People in the community were greatly moved by Franklin's story of redemption, which made them think about their own actions and attitudes. As time went on, people started to think about their biases and look for ways to improve their own lives. The Thompson family and Franklin were sitting around a big table in the office of the foundation. There were lots of bright posters and flyers all around the table. They were having a deep conversation about the upcoming event, which would be their biggest fundraiser yet. "We need to make this very special," Harry Thompson said, his eyes shining with joy. "Something that will really showcase what our foundation stands for." Franklin happily nodded. "What about having it at the school? It's in the middle of town and would show our people how much we care about them." Cynthia Thompson gave Franklin a warm smile. "That's a great thought, Franklin. It's great for getting everyone together." As the weeks went by, Franklin threw himself into getting ready. He talked to area businesses for help, made phone calls, and coordinated with volunteers for long hours. Everybody could see how dedicated he was. When the event day came, the community center was packed with people. There were colorful banners on the walls and tables all around the room. Each table showed a different program that the foundation sponsored. Franklin stood at the door and greeted people with a smile and a strong handshake. A lot of people were shocked to see the once humble millionaire so involved and enthusiastic about the cause. "Franklin, I hardly recognize you," cried Mrs. Johnson, who had lived in the area for a long time. "You seem so different." When Franklin smiled, his eyes got wrinkled up. "Mr. Johnson, I don't feel the same. I never thought this foundation would change my life so much." As the night went on, Franklin got up on stage to talk to the crowd. When he talked about the work of the foundation and how it changed his life, his voice shook a little. "Before I met the Thompsons, I thought success was measured by the size of your bank account," he said. "But now, true success comes from the lives you touch and the good you do for others." Many people in the crowd nodded their heads in agreement as they listened. The room went wild with applause when Franklin was done speaking. Afterward, many people came up to him and praised his earnestness and commitment. As the night came to a close, it was clear that the event had gone very well. The foundation raised more money than they ever thought possible. which meant they could make their projects bigger and help even more people in need. Harry Thompson gave Franklin a pat on the back, and his eyes lit up with joy. "I saw you do it, Franklin. This was possible because of your hard work." Franklin's chest felt warm. He was truly happy for the first time in his life, because he knew that his work was making a difference in people's lives. As the last guests left the community center, Franklin stood by the doorway, shook hands, and said goodbye in a warm way. The evening was full of fun things to do, laughing, and touching moments. As the room got quieter, Franklin was left to think alone. He walked slowly down the hall, leaving a trail of sound behind him. Banners of different colors still hung from the walls, telling him of how well the night had gone. Franklin stopped in front of a display with pictures of the foundation's work. The pictures showed happy kids in new schools, older people getting care, and families moving into their first houses. Franklin's thoughts went back to that terrible night at the Silver Spoon as he looked at the pictures. He could still hear the sound of his own cruel laugh, and see the hurt look in the Thompson family's eyes. He felt bad when he thought about it, but it also made him feel very thankful for how far he had come. With a shake of his head, Franklin said to himself, "What a journey." He walked over to a chair nearby, sat down, and let out a deep sigh. Like a warm blanket, the weight of the night's victory fell on him. Franklin closed his eyes and felt a peace that he had never felt. In his previous life, when he was rich and cocky, he realized in this quiet moment that he had found something much more valuable than anything he could have bought: a real sense of purpose. He felt more joy than he had ever felt before when he helped other people and saw their lives change. He woke up when someone put a soft hand on his shoulder. Franklin looked up and saw Harry Thompson making a funny face. "Quite a night, wasn't it?" Harry spoke with pride and warmth in his voice. Franklin nodded, and his eyes were shining with happy tears that hadn't dried yet. He said, "I never thought I could feel this satisfied." "Thank you, Harry. Your family and I gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve one." Harry put his hand on Franklin's shoulder. "My friend, you've earned it. People should be proud of the man you've become." As they stood there together and looked out at the chaos of the event, Franklin felt like he belonged. He was no longer the strange millionaire who looked down on everyone else. He was a part of something important and bigger. Franklin turned to look at Harry, and his eyes were filled with sadness. He told Harry, "I can't thank you enough for giving me this chance." His voice was full of thanks. "You and your family were nice to me when I didn't deserve it. You've made my life better in ways I never thought possible." Harry gave Franklin a warm smile and put his hand on his shoulder. "Franklin, you were the one who changed. We just opened a door. You picked to walk through it." Franklin shook his head because Harry's modesty moved him so much. "However, you saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. You had faith in me even when I was bad. That's what this foundation is all about," Harry said. "Seeing what people are capable of, and giving them a chance to improve. My friend, you've grown in ways that make all of us happy." Franklin's eyes got bigger. "Really? Are you happy with me?" Harry nodded, and his face looked serious. "More than you think. You've made a huge difference in this neighborhood. People have been moved by you to help others and see beyond themselves." "What a strong thing that is, Franklin." He could feel a lump in his throat. He never thought that man who had treated him badly in the past would say something like that. "I had no idea that life could be this good," he said. "The lessons I've learned from you and your family have changed everything for me." Harry's eyes got wrinkled as he understood. "That's the beautiful thing about kindness and forgiveness, Franklin. They can change lives, and not just the lives of the people we help. They can also change our own." For a moment, the two men stood in quiet comfort and thought about the trip that had brought them to this point. Franklin had a lot of respect and love for Harry, and it was clear that Harry felt the same way. Speaking in a soft voice, Harry said, "When we first met, I never thought we'd be here as friends. But I'm thankful for it." Franklin just nodded because he couldn't say anything else because of how upset he was. He grabbed Harry's hand and shook it hard and quickly. There was a world of understanding, respect, and friendship in that handshake. It was a tie that was made through hardship and strengthened by a common goal. Franklin kept doing work for the Thompson Foundation, and he put everything he had into every job. Over the course of the months, he thought about the amazing trip that had led him to this point. He seemed like a distant memory of the man he used to be. In his place was someone who put equality, humility, and kindness above all else. The Thompson family was proud to see how dedicated Franklin stayed to the cause. They were amazed at how far he had come since that terrible night at the Silver Spoon. "It's truly amazing how Franklin has changed," Cynthia Thompson told her husband one night. "He's become such an integral part of our work." Harry agreed and nodded. "Seeing how much he cares about our mission is inspiring. He does more than just talk the talk. Every day he walks the walk." Franklin's impact grew as his love for the foundation did. Those who knew him well and used to hang out with him started to notice that he had changed. Many people were interested in what drove Franklin and how happy he seemed to be in his eyes. As Franklin was leaving a foundation meeting one afternoon, he saw a young man who looked sad, sitting on a bench outside. Franklin saw the scene and thought of all the people the foundation had helped. "Are you all right?" Franklin asked, as he walked up to the boy. The young man, whose name was Alex, said he was having money problems and wasn't sure what to do with his life. Franklin did not want to just give a gift. He felt he had to do more. "Why don't we grab a coffee?" Franklin made a point. "I'd like to hear more about your situation." Franklin paid close attention to Alex's story for the next hour. He recognized in the young man a part of himself and the people he had been helping through the foundation. The young man needed help and a new point of view. "Alex," Franklin said, with a slant, "I want to do more than give you money of help. If you're interested, I'd like to be your guide. You have a lot of promise, and I think you can get through these problems with some help and hard work." Alex's eyes got really big with surprise and thanks. "Really? Would you do that for me?" Franklin gave a warm smile. "Of course. I've learned that helping other people is what makes me truly happy. We should get together often, and I'll share what I know about working hard, not giving up, and making the most of chances." Over the next few months, Franklin was Alex's guide. He helped him with job applications, budgeting, and growing as a person. As things got better for Alex, Franklin felt very good about himself, because he knew he had made a real difference in someone's life. He stood on stage at the next big foundation event and looked out at all the faces in the crowd. There were many people in the room whose lives had been changed by the work of the Thompson Foundation. As Franklin started to speak, his heart grew heavy with emotion. The first thing he said was, "A year ago, I was a different man. My own biases and misunderstandings made me blind. But because of the kindness and smart, because of the Thompson family, I've learned how important it is to be kind and fair." As Franklin went on with his speech, he saw familiar faces in the crowd. These included people he had worked with, volunteers he had helped find, and even Alex, who was sitting happily in the crowd. Each person told a story of a life that had been changed, a story of hope and persistence. In a strong voice, Franklin said, "Today, I stand before you, as a rich businessman, but as a humble servant to our community. I reject discrimination and prejudice in all forms, and I commit myself fully to the work of this foundation." After that, there was thunderous clapping. When Franklin got off the stage, he was surrounded by people who wanted to thank him and tell him how the foundation had helped them. At that very moment, Franklin felt deeply satisfied, because he knew that his change had affected many people's lives. After what he did to the Thompson family, do you think Franklin Stone deserves a second chance? Yes or no, your answer in the box below. I'd love to hear your point of view. Also, Please follow my channel if you liked the video. I spend a lot of time writing these sweet stories for you, and your support is what keeps me going.